For those who are signed on to the Zoom webinar, it'd be great if you can input your name or the company you're working with, just so we know who to promote to panelists as the time comes.
Okay, now, so we are good with the live stream now.
Okay, thank you, Kamal. I'll go ahead and get started since we have everyone that will be in attendance. So good afternoon. I'm Josh Sun, along with John Law here, and we're with the Department of Planning and Development. Welcome to the April 13th, 2022 meeting of the Committee on Design. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the DPD's YouTube page. If you're part that one. All right, to our esteemed committee, thank you for volunteering your time to be a part of this advisory group. To the members of the public who are joining us, what you will see here today and at future Committee on Design meetings are projects currently under review by DPD staff. The committee is a voluntary advisory body of design professionals that provide their expertise on design issues. The committee is not a substitute for Plan Commission, as it is not a forum for public debate, nor is the advice of the committee legally binding. It is the hope that today's discourse will lead to recommendations that will elevate the design excellence of the city of Chicago. These recommendations will be forwarded to DPD staff for consideration as they review these projects for Plan Commission and subsequent approvals. I will now continue on to the roll call. If you are here, just please say present or here. Catherine Baker.
Present.
Jackie Koo. Andre Brumfeld. Philip Enquist.
No, I appreciate.
Yes, here.
Jeannie Gang is not here. Amanda Williams.
So yeah, I'll circle.
Also excused.
Meeting on the books.
Eleanor Gorski, I believe is excused as well.
Next steps regarding the
Casey Jones.
Present.
Geography.
Maria Villalobos.
I know I can keep going through the deck, but
Leon
yes,
Walker.
Saving the character building within this one.
Okay. To members of the public, you are welcome to begin dropping comments and questions into the Q&A box. Committee members are invited to review this information during and after each presentation and incorporate the comments into the discussion. We will not be reviewing questions or comments from the public individually. To the applicant teams, please clearly state your name and your relation to the project prior to speaking. You'll have between 15 and 20 minutes to present the proposal. Committee members, please hold your comments and questions until after each presentation. We'll now head to the first item on the agenda. 301 South Green Street, located in the 27th Ward. And Heidi, feel free to, yep, perfect, thanks. 301 South Green is a transit-oriented development comprised of a 36-story residential building proposed at the southeast corner of Jackson Boulevard and Green Street.
So we may have some.
The tower includes 362 rental units set atop a 3-level podium containing the lobby, leasing office, building services, and 129 parking spaces. Residential amenities are situated on the 4th and 36th floors. The project intends to be consistent with densities found in downtown TOD developments with similar units and reduced parking. Please proceed with the presentation, and again, state your name prior to speaking. Thank you.
Do we have Jack George on the line?
Yeah, is Jack
From
on?
Ackerman?
I don't see him.
Um,
Well,
There is a J. George shown.
okay.
that should be him.
He's muted.
Jack or Chris, if you'd like to unmute yourself and begin the presentation, please.
Sure. Is Jack, are you able to unmute yourself? Wait a second. Okay, there I am. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for the time this afternoon. My name is Jack George. I'm an attorney and I represent GSP Development Group, which is the made up of Lee Golub and Larry Debb, the developers on this project. The property that we're going to be talking to you about today is the property at the southeast corner of Jackson and Green, which has the address of 301 South Green. The property is zoned DS3, and we are seeking to rezone it to DX7 and then to a residential plan development. And we would be taking a bonus of 4.5 for a FAR of 11.5. The proposal that we're going to be talking about to you today is a 36-story building with 36 floors. It would have 362 units and 129 parking spaces. The architects on the project are GP Partners, and with me today is Vladimir Andreevich and also Jim Getch. Also, Lee Golub would just like to say a few words, and then after he finishes, we would just like to have Vlad and Jim go through the documentation and the PowerPoint that we have that describes the design features of the proposed project at 301 South Green. Lee, can you just say a few words, and then we can go on to Vlad?
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I know most of you. Is Larry not on? I didn't see Larry on. Larry Deb from GSP. Okay, well, if now I was going to introduce Larry. We are co-developing this project. This is a site's owned by Brad Mathis from Lynn Mathis, who's selling the property as he's closing his shop up, his general contracting business. So this is a JV between both of us. Obviously, we've done many projects out in the city. This would be our first one over in this part of town. And with Larry, who's been around a long time in the city of Chicago in different capacities, most of his development has been in the burbs or outside of Illinois. So just wanted to say that and let Vlad take it away on behalf of us.
Thank you, Lee. Can everybody hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time and for the opportunity to present our project at 301 South Green. My name is Vladimir Andreevich. I'm a design principal with Getch Partners here in Chicago. Here with me are Jim Getch, our chairman and co-CEO, James Zhang, the president and co-CEO, Patrick Loughran. He's the principal. So that's the team that's working on the project. The slide that you see in front of you is just to illustrate the West Loop Design Guidelines and Central Area Action Plan are the two documents that give us the directive in the decision-making on the project. Next slide, please. On the macro level, we are approximately half a mile north of the Blue Line Halstead Station, which is just one block west from our site, going south on Peoria Street. There are also several bus lines within a block from our site, which you will see on the subsequent slide. So that gives us a really good location for the public transportation. On this map, you can also see that the nearest grocery shops are within 1,000 feet. H Mart, less than 2,000 feet is the Target on the west side. And the site is also just one block from the Greektown Halstead corridor with many restaurants. Next slide. Thank you. So here, just to illustrate the access to the public transportation, just zoomed into the location, our block, and you can see the points where the public transportation is, where the bus stops are, and you can see on the Peoria connection that goes to the overpass over Eisenhower, where the UIC is actually the one on the other side. Yeah, right there. That's where the stop to Blue Line is. Next slide. So here are several photos of the current conditions of the site. In the upper left corner, in that image, that's the view looking southeast at the corner of Jackson Boulevard to the left and Green Street to the right. The site is currently...
could I just interrupt for a minute? We're getting a lot of background noise. I'm just wondering if everyone could put their computers on mute. If
yeah, that'd be great. Okay, that That sounds better. Thank you. Thank you. So as you can see, this view in the upper left corner, that's the view looking southeast at the corner of Jackson Boulevard, and Jackson Boulevard is to the left and Green Street is to the right. The site is currently occupied by surface parking lots on the corner and a two-story building, which was originally Lynn Mattis's headquarters. In the background, you can see the buildings along Halsted varying in height and number of floors. Some are two-story tall, some are four-story. And then you can see right in the middle of the image, there's a 12-story building that was recently completed at 808 Van Buren, I think is the address. Also note that the sidewalk along Jackson Boulevard is 9 feet wide, and the sidewalk on Green Street is wider. It's 15 feet approximately wide. So there is more sidewalk width along Green Street. On the other two images, just to mention a couple of buildings that are across from us that kind of give the sense of neighborhood. North from us on the upper right image, that's an 8-story building. It is a residential building at 820 Jackson. And then there is one that's just west from our building, which you will see in the lower left image. That building is at 833 West Jackson. And actually you can see it on the upper, yeah, right there. So that gives you kind of a sense of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Just quickly, this is to give you some sense of the height of the buildings in the immediate neighborhood. Next slide. So getting into the design of our building, we did some initial massing studies of the bulk of the building. We had some lower building that was wider, some mid solution, and then we landed on this one, which is in front of you, just to give you a sense of bulk of the building that we're presenting. So this is, we wanted to do the smallest footprint as possible for the tower and elongate the building to get very slender appearance of the building. And so we proposed a 36-story tower with about 10,000 square foot floor plate for the tower, which we find is the minimal optimal solution for residential typology. The podium includes building a lobby, services, back of a house, and garage with 129 parking spaces. The podium is 3 stories tall, it's about 41 feet tall, and it would have a fully landscaped amenity deck visible from surrounding neighboring buildings. We don't have any retail proposed in the building. Next slide. Our goal was to create a tall and slender building, as I mentioned. And we also, with that, we wanted to open and maximize open space around the building for views around the site. We positioned main entry to the building close to the corner of 2 streets to reinforce the idea of active bays. And we pushed parking and loading entrances to the southwest corner, so further away from the corner of 2 streets. Referencing West Loop design guidelines, we aim to preserve and enhance street wall. As our parcel is on the corner site, we position the tower close to both street frontages, and we line the building with active use. In our case, it's a residential lobby that stretches along Jackson Boulevard on one side and for first 100 feet on the Green Street frontage, which is about 40–45% of the frontage along Green Street. Next slide, please.
Hi, you have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, I will be short. The tower is set back about 5 to 8 feet from each of the streets, depending on, you will see that the tower has a geometry that goes in and out. So depending on where you measure it, it's between 5 and 8 feet from the building. Next slide, please. So architecturally, we started with expressing the structure of the building vertically as the columns of the building are pushed out to the perimeter wall of the building. Next slide. Then we introduced horizontal breaks to modulate the scale of the facade, add solidity, and respond to the architectural language of the neighborhood. Next slide. And then we started to break the mass. We offset the grids to create staggered pattern, and we started folding the planes between the columns in a sawtooth pattern as a more playful counterpoint to the many rectilinear developments this neighborhood can see in recent years. Next slide. Focusing on Podium, the scale and materiality of the podium enhances the pedestrian experience while fitting within the architectural language of the neighborhood. Next slide. The fourth floor contains residential amenities, a large vegetated roof area, and a common terrace at the north side of the site, which contributes to an active streetscape along Jackson Boulevard. Additional amenity space and an exterior pool overlooking the Chicago skyline is provided at the 36th floor. Next slide, please. So this slide just supports previous one and illustrates the potential amount for landscaped area at various levels. This is just a graphic representation, not the actual landscape design. We have Dan Weinbach as part of the team, and we will work further on the landscape design for the project. Next slide, please. Here are the overall renderings. To the left is a view from the northeast looking southwest, and to the right is a view from the northwest looking southeast. The indented V shape of the facade modules will, depending on the time of the day, reflect sun at a different angle. Secondary articulation with the expressed column verticals and stagger slab edge cover elements will additionally reinforce the exterior expression of the tower. Next slide. Here are some precedent images. They represent where our inspiration comes from and exhibit two distinct features. One is the folded plane facade element that enhances the dynamic feel of the facade. And the other one is the treatment and modulation of the podium, which you can see on the middle images and the image at the bottom left. Next slide, please. At the pedestrian level, we started with proportions that are more appropriate for the pedestrian scale. The main element is the 3-story portal with the brick as the main material and some metal detailing. The storefront is imagined as a very transparent lobby that stretches the entire length of Jackson Boulevard. The lobby is envisioned as an active use that combines co-working space and leasing functions. The second and third floor are cladded in glass with fritted pattern for the majority of the facade, with some perforated metal panel for garage ventilation, which you see on the left side, right there. Next slide, please. As you turn the corner, the lobby extends along Green Street and stretches the first 100 feet of the street frontage. The ground floor is very transparent and light, and the main entry is close to the corner of 2 streets. The sidewalk along Green Street is wider, and the building is pushed back another 5 feet and creates space for large planters and trees along the sidewalk. The upper floors are cladded in glass with a frit pattern. Next slide. So this slide focuses on the main entry canopy and vestibule. Again, the emphasis is on the transparency and lightness of the pedestrian experience. Next slide. So zooming out to the entire length of the lobby along Green Street, we can also see the maximized landscaping and trees in the foreground. Next slide, please.
You have 5 minutes left also.
Okay, this is the view of the southwest corner of the podium. To the left, we just to the left, that's the loading dock entry door. yeah, right there. And to the right is parking entry exit door. We plan to use high quality materials in this area and carry the facade rhythm of the building. And then on the second and third floor, we introduce perforated metal as a material for the garage to provide natural ventilation. Next slide, please. Just a few studies of the garage that we did during the process. Next slide. Focusing on the tower facade details, we wanted to show the level of detail we plan for the building. Columns are expressed on the facade with the champagne colored metal panel that enhances the verticality and slenderness of the building. The V-shaped window bays have minimal detail, and the charcoal colored slab edge covers blend in with the glass. Finally, the triangular attachments in the staggered pattern will create an additional shadow and detail that reinforces the facade treatment. Next slide, please. This is another look. This is more straight on to the west or east facade of the building, which is the longer side. Next slide, please. Just another closer look to the detail where you can see those staggered details that those are accent slab edge covers. Next slide, please. And just a look up into the tower, just to illustrate the slenderness and the quality of detail and the character of the building that will be perceived from the pedestrian scale. Next slide. In terms of exterior materials and facade systems, just to reiterate here, expressed vertical will be clad in a pre-finished aluminum accent panel. The glass portions, those are window wall system with insulated slab edge cover. We selected darker charcoal color to blend in with the glass and minimize impact on the verticality of the building. And finally, triangular accent slab edge elements will create additional reflection and shadow and add additional depth to the overall expression. Next slide, please. At the podium level, brick is selected as a main material for solid portion with some metal detailing that frames glass. Ground floor will be cladded in a very transparent glass, and second and third floor will have infill of either fritted glass or perforated metal panel, depending on the location on facade. Next slide, please. The solar study illustrates that the podium creates a minimal impact to the surrounding parcels. The tower casts a shadow during spring and fall primarily, but given the small footprint, it clears out of the area in the shadow quickly. Next slide, please. So just quickly going through the floor plans, the base of the building is in line with the context buildings. The area in yellow represents the main lobby extending along Jackson Boulevard and the first 100 feet of Green Street. The red arrow indicates the location of Vestibule. The two black arrows represent two entries for loading and trash and parking and entry and exit. The lighter gray is parking and darker gray is back of house functions. In terms of the streetscape, there is an opportunity for larger planters to be placed along Green Street. Next slide, please. Just jumping to levels 2 and 3, which are reserved for parking and tenant storage. Next slide, please. The fourth floor is the amenity floor. Area in green on the left plan is the amenity deck. And then on the right, we start with a typical floor plate. Those have 12 and 11 units per floor. Upper floors would have 11. And then on the next slide, please. So you can see the 11 unit plan on the left, and then the 36th floor, which has the pool deck and some of the amenity spaces facing Chicago skyline. Next slide, please.
You have 1 minute left.
Okay, so just a roof plan it illustrates potential for the landscape and green roof area. Next slide, please. Looking at the overall elevation. So this is the west elevation, the broader side of the building. Next slide, please. North elevation, which is the narrow side of the tower. Next slide, please. The sections, those are self-explanatory. I'm not going to go in detail on these. Next slide, please. To select the materials, for the base of the building, we took inspiration from the neighborhood, with the brick and metal creating a framework for the base of the building. Next slide, please. Moving up to the tower, it becomes more glassy, but still preserves solid elements. The faceted facade gives it another level of dimensionality and quality. Next slide. Here is an aerial view of the building looking northeast with the Chicago skyline in the background. Just put it in the context. Next slide, please. And then looking southeast, where the height of the building starts to taper down, especially across the Eisenhower. Next slide. And this is the lights line, just to summarize several points from the zoning ordinance pertaining to building features and how the design responds to them. And with that, we conclude our presentation. Thank you all, and we're happy to answer any of your questions or comments. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Turn my camera on. Apologies, there is a lot of noise because I am sitting in an office with other folks that are also in meetings. So just FYI.
This one right here.
Committee members, please take a moment to review any comments received from the public in the Q&A box. There are several, and incorporate them however you see fit.
Yeah, there you go. That's an encyclopedia.
Could I start, Josh?
Sure.
Okay, this is Phil Enquist. I'd like to start with the base of the building. I think that, first I'd like to start with the presentation. I just want to commend the design team on creating such a complete and very clear presentation. I think the committee really appreciates the clarity of this. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
This neighborhood is quickly becoming a high-density residential neighborhood, and the back streets behind Halsted, Green, Peoria, Sangamon, Morgan, are all seeing sort of rapid development, infill, and becoming active, just like the Fulton Market District to the north. And I would really encourage you to think about the number of students that are here, the number of residents that are coming here, and encourage you to look at more of a mixed-use program. A few times you said that the residential lobby is an active use, and I would like to challenge that. I don't think residential lobbies are active public uses. They're really private. You have a very large lobby, and I would like to encourage the design team to consider reducing that lobby and introducing mixed use, introducing a cafe on Jackson that can carry the active uses of Halsted to Green Street, and find ways to engage the public in this very important infill building, because I think it will be a very important addition to the neighborhood. So I think that's number one, is to really seriously consider how you could get some active uses at the street level. On Green Street, you also have a very long facade with just one set of doors. And how can you rethink the support uses on Green, the utility spaces that are at sidewalk level to be more than utility spaces? And can you rethink your base plan, your street level plan, so that that long facade on Green Street can also accommodate some mixed use? Because we're seeing this area really evolve rapidly as a residential neighborhood. And really, once you leave Halsted, you just see bits and pieces of retail or food-oriented businesses on the sidewalks. And I think that the neighborhood needs it, and you have quite a bit of ground floor. And it seems to me that you have enough room to rethink the setback of the building, those blue spaces facing West Jackson, and the gray spaces facing Green Street, how you could incorporate more imaginative mixed use at the ground level to help really activate this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, those are all good points. and we will go through them. I took a note of all the comments that you have. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, the ultimate goal is to activate as much as possible. In our case, we are challenged. We have, out of 4 sizes of building, we have 2 that we work with, and parking, entry, exit, and loading, and some of the back of a house unfortunately needs the front door, or not the front door, but they need the access to the sidewalk. So we will have to corral them and work with them to make it work with our plan. But agreed with you.
Thank you.
They have any
Thank you.
follow-up questions?
Maria?
Any clarification?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Joseph. Thank you for the clear presentation. I could not agree more with Phil, and I want to second his comments on the need to rethink the floor plan to bring in retail space that can serve the growing residential community. I also wanted to call attention to the sidewalk on West Jackson Boulevard. And how will be really ideal to continue for that sidewalk width to be consistent with the width on South Green Street. It's an evolving neighborhood with a change in zoning, right? So one will expect the rest of the block also to be redeveloped eventually, and even if not, a 404 new tower will benefit enormously from a more generous space for pedestrians in the base, while designing that streetscape, reducing barriers, tall planters and things like that. I think that all that can be designed more elegantly in a more sort of sinuous, continuous way to facilitate pedestrian movement in continuity. One more comment regarding the general kind of volume of the tower, and if it will be possible after you evolve on your design iterations, for the tower to kind of register the different street walls and heights existing in the neighborhood, and how can that perhaps contribute to a volume that not break down, but relates in better ways to the existing context. So perhaps marking or taking as reference some of the existing maximum heights of the buildings immediately adjacent to it, not to cut the bulk, but to reflect it in the kind of process of sculpting the tower. And I would love to see more of your ideas on how the upper floor landscapes will relate to a more generous pedestrian space on the first floor. But great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I mean, just we thought about a few of those things. First of all, on your first comment, so that I understand clearly. So your suggestion is that the sidewalk along Jackson Boulevard practically becomes 6 foot wider to match what is currently on Green Street. Is that correct?
I think it's a necessity for a 400 feet tall tower. Yeah.
So that was your first, and then everything relating to the planters, which we agree. In terms of registering with the buildings in the neighborhood, I mean, we are on one side we have buildings that's a 2-story building. On the other side we have a building that's 8-story building. So our podium, we try to balance between the two and find a good mid-level. And when you look at it, this podium is really very compressed, and in our opinion, it doesn't make a huge impact relative to other buildings. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I was referring to the podium. Like if you see the building immediately adjacent to the right, that is a floored stall, right? So that height, which seems to be an important kind of height in a moment in history of the neighborhood, can that be registered or become part of the expression in the sculpting process of the tower? Is as
Yeah.
opposed to the current tower as it is, which is the same dimension all the way up, right?
Yeah.
Can,
Understood. Yep. That's a good point. Thank you.
Allow them to.
Thanks. I believe,
set up
Casey,
those,
you're
on their
next.
units.
Sorry about that. I'll be very brief in my remarks because I agree with my two colleagues who preceded me. I just wanted to note that a number of the comments and questions that have been posed by the audience relate to the changing character of the neighborhood. And I think that that's an important thing to note in the development of your project. It's my understanding that the height of the building is actually allowable given all of the various aspects of the building and what that triggers in terms of zoning. But to echo Maria's comment, I think that there is an architectural character in this neighborhood that helps to define it. And while I don't think that the building should imitate that character, I do find that even using a contemporary vocabulary, there isn't a lot of character to the tower. And I think that the firm could put more time and attention into the exterior expression of the building and trying to ensure that it contributes positively to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Casey, I was wondering, we could just sort of talk openly for a minute. If the vertical structural elements were not so dominant and the waving fluid pattern of the curtain wall could somehow be more accentuated, like the analogies. I mean, the team has shown a lot of analogies that are quite dynamic. I just wondered if if you felt the verticals were sort of fighting with the horizontals. You see these analogies don't have the verticals breaking up that sort of wave rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that, Phil. I think that the character of the tower, there is this sort of unsuccessful tension between the horizontals and the verticals. What's nice about these examples is that there's variation on every floor and that the horizontality of it is being stressed. Here, it's not clear why the 4-floor spacing exists between these kind of various horizontal elements. And then the verticality of the columns that run all the way up is, I think not as successful as the examples that you cited.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, our thinking was, without getting into argument about the architecture, but generally we just felt that there is a lot of buildings that are happening in this neighborhood, and they all have this kind of gridded, warehousey look, which complements the history of the neighborhood. But at a certain point, you just have there is a point when there is a lot of the same. So we just wanted to build up on that and try to do something that's slightly different than what's currently seen around.
I do just want to point out, this is the Committee on Design, so discussions about the architecture are part of the focus of the committee. So,
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Catherine, I believe you're next.
Thank
And I do want to mention, we do have 2 other items on the agenda. So we'll have maybe a couple more minutes on this. So, but Catherine, go ahead and move forward with your comments.
Thanks, Josh. A real quick comment. Halstead Street in this neighborhood is very pedestrian oriented, very rich, a lot of texture, very pleasant to be a pedestrian in this area. So my comment really starts to, I think, build on what Maria talked about. And then especially on Green Street, having 2 curb cuts that are quite wide, really, you do start to lose the pedestrian experience, and you don't have any activated spaces. I'm wondering if you could lose the loading and flip the park or the bike storage and combine the loading with the parking entry and exit just to remove one of those curb cuts. And I'm glad to see, you know, the additional parkway with trees and just to really make that a much more pleasant pedestrian experience along Green Street. Thank you.
Right, thanks. Yeah, actually, if you look at the original or current condition, there is a really big curb cut that's currently on site. I don't think we have it well, maybe you can see in the photos, yeah. But there is a curb cut that's probably 80 feet wide that stretches along that. And probably Lynn Mattis used it for trucks or whatever they got in and out of the site. So we actually reduced the curb cuts to, the number is still the same. They're just significantly smaller than what's currently there. But clearly understand your comment about trying to condense it into one.
All right, thank you.
Well, I think even more than that, I think Catherine's first comment that this is a very walkable neighborhood is right. And it's so full of students and the activity on Halsted Street that I think you could see your building as building an even stronger walkable neighborhood. So active uses, fewer driveway cuts, more gracious landscape. I think we're all kind of coming down in that direction that this is a project that could really contribute to the walkability of the West Loop.
Good point. Thank you.
And reviewing the, you know, all the kind of street trees, planting techniques will be fantastic because, for example, could not agree more with Catherine on combining loading spaces to create a more pedestrian environment. If you look at one of the plans, it says 15 feet for the planter and 10 feet for the pedestrian area. If those measurements are correct, which might not be, you know, because then the space on Jackson says 9 feet. So if that's 9, the one down here cannot be 10, right? Something is off.
Yeah. The area where you read that, actually, there is another 5 feet that's pushed back on the upper side. So you see that the building actually goes in another 5 feet. So you're working with 20 feet. In total dimension.
If I could just add, Maria, I think the dimension that you're reading is 15 feet, 10 inches, not 15 feet and then.
Hard to read. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like
15 feet, 10, is that double line? Okay. But even so, like that, you know, then if that's 15 feet, that planter is taking what? Is leaving for the pedestrian, what, 6 feet to walk by?
Correct.
That's rough. Right? So that's when the details start to matter a lot. And there are other ways of planting street trees that, you know, will free up a lot more of the sidewalk. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think with that, we will move on to the next project. If anyone else has any comments, feel free to type them into the Q&A. So the second item, let me see. All right. So the second item on the agenda is located at 3831 West Chicago Avenue, located in the 37th Ward. The project is a block-long mixed-use transit-served location along Chicago Avenue and Humboldt Park. The development will be a 4-story multi-family building consisting of 60 apartments, 80% low-income housing tax credits, 20% market rate, 10,380 square feet of commercial retail and community space, and a public plaza to activate the transit-rich corridor of Chicago Avenue. Ernest, feel free to pull up the presentation. The project will achieve Enterprise Green Communities criteria and is striving to achieve Passive House certification. Once that presentation is pulled up, feel free to proceed with the presentation and please state your name prior to speaking. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh, for the introduction. If tech support can assist, I cannot share screen at currently.
Just one moment on it. You should be good now.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the Committee on Design. For the record, my name is Ernest Bellamy, a West Region City Planner with the Department of Planning and Development. I am the DPD project manager for this proposal. I'll be controlling the slide deck progression for this presentation this afternoon. Presenting on today's meeting are the developer, AJ Patton of 548 Development, and architect Elias Babaroutsos of Lamar Johnson Collaborative. Additionally, other team members are present who will assist in answering questions during the Q&A portion of today's presentation. From here, I will transition over to AJ Patton to continue on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And good afternoon to everyone. As you mentioned, my name is AJ Patton, founder of 548 Development. We're excited to present to you this project. It is a part of the larger Invest Southwest initiative from the city. This is in Humboldt Park. I'll be very brief because I want to hand this right over to the design team because that's what we're here for today. As was mentioned, this is a 60 unit building, mixed use. We've got a anchor tenant of a grocery store going into the ground floor. We also have, this will be a not just enterprise communities, but enterprise plus, which if you follow that sustainability matrix, that's at the top end there, as well as passive house. So really proud of not just the design, but also our commitments to sustainability. That's a part of our mission and thesis. And our architect for this project is the Lamar Johnson Collaborative, led by Leslie Roth and Louis and their entire team. And we're just really excited about this project and presenting it to you guys and look forward to your feedback and thoughts.
Yeah, and just to mention, the design narrative is in line with numerous planning and design guidelines that have been previously produced for Humboldt Park. From here, and thanks AJ for that introduction, I will transition it over to Lamar Johnson Collaborative.
Great. Can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. So good afternoon. My name is Louis Babaroutsos, and I'm a principal with LJC here in Chicago, and we're very pleased to present 3831 West Chicago Avenue, an effort that we feel embodies the Invest Southwest initiative in a very placemaking way, really driven by sustainability and community culture. Next slide, please. So in starting this project, we really asked ourselves, what is at the heart of the matter? And what is the story? What is the intent? And we began with these vision statements to drive design decisions. So first of all, that the project must be people-driven, neighborhood-focused, and that it would reflect the community's desire for self-determination through wealth building, community wealth building. Next. And we really wanted the project to embody, as I mentioned, the improvement initiative of Invest Southwest along this key commercial corridor on Chicago's west side. Next. We really felt that this had to become a transformative project that both acknowledged Humboldt Park's cultural and artistic heritage, but also kind of created and carved out its own defined sense of place. And we felt that the project, in order to be successful, had to be able to spur investment on adjacent blocks and really offer vibrancy in a district that the residents could live, shop, and socialize. And really, sustainability beyond thinking about metrics of it, we wanted to promote a natural environment and a very healthy lifestyle. And finally, we really wanted to think of a project that integrated architecture and landscape and urban design, along with outdoor space that would engage with the community. Next. So at the same time, our site analysis was giving us a feel for the neighborhood itself. So in the center of the page, you see our site along the commercial corridor of Chicago Avenue, surrounded by a lot of multi and single family residential in the yellow, as well as some industrial space in purple. Next. And within these 5 and 10-minute radii, you see walking distance to several amenities, including educational, religious, medical, but also anchor institutions like the Nia Family Center and the Kelly YMCA. And you can see the major streets along with West Chicago Avenue that kind of broadly define this area about 5 miles from the loop. We also wanted to map available green space to understand right away where there were opportunities, where there were deficiencies, and therefore opportunities on our site to incorporate more green space. Next. And then in this zooming in, we identified prominent local amenities. Again, you see the Kelly YMCA, but also, it was very important, the fact that this is on a major transportation route with a bus stop just not even one full block away to the west. So really understanding the arterial nature of this corridor, the way people arrive to the site and where they're coming from was very important. Next. And on this site data page, you see the block itself bound by Avers to the east and Springfield to the west. Avers is a one-way south. Springfield is a one-way north. And you can see the metrics and the zoning that we're dealing with, about 52 feet in height allowable, and really an L-shaped site split by an alley. And the way to deal with those two parcels and try to create a unified site was a major initiative for us. Next. So here you see site photos, both from the northwest on the top of the page, northeast in the bottom right, and then an open north parcel on the bottom left image that did figure into our initial planning that I'll discuss in a bit. Next. So as I mentioned, sustainability is a key design determinant for the project. And so, in order to meet the project's sustainability goals, we wanted to incorporate certain net zero building standards that were appropriate. In our case, reducing energy consumption, using renewable energy, maximizing the building envelope and performance. And, those are things, right? But what does that mean from a design standpoint? For example, we know we're going to have very limited glazed openings to meet very stringent requirements. So finding the balance between these kind of strategies and then the more kind of psychological benefits of natural light and seeing are something that we're thinking a lot about. Finally, we're looking at several incentives: FIAS, Energy Star for multifamily, zero energy ready homes, Green Communities Plus. What a litany that we're kind of balancing to try to come up with something that is quite unique in the largest passive house residential, I believe, in Chicago. Next. So in terms of our concept, you see here some initial sketches and some reference images for a massing concept really derived of a monolithic form carved to offer a series of outdoor spaces and moments for residents, for gathering, and really for dwelling as opposed to simply residing. Next. And in this diagram, you could see the way our massing evolved. First of all, anchoring the east and west urban corners in step one, and really acknowledging open space to the west side of the site. And the reason we chose open space for the west side of the site is because the inherent open space at the southwest, because of our L shape, and also a small parcel to the north of West Chicago Avenue that I'll point out in a bit. In step two, we created a U-shaped setting in kind of this kind of protective environment for the residential units and created an overhang so that we had protected outdoor space at the northwest corner and the west side of the building. And then in step 3, we really started to break down the massing into this kind of canyon effect on the Chicago Avenue side, as well as tried to think about the scale of the urban grid and how that might relate to potentially smaller apertures for residents. So this is what really informed the massing. Next. And then very quickly, the overall metric, 60 units, about 55,000 square feet for the residential, and then a ground floor consisting of retail, support spaces, and community for about 70,000 square feet total. Next. From a facade language, it was very important for us to have something that was quite meaningful. And so we were very interested in this idea of a mosaic, thinking about the kind of fabric of the neighborhood, what's been consistent, what's changed, and just the neighborhood over time. And so, you know, at the bottom right, you see a Bisa Butler piece that is really a holistic element made up of various individual components. And that was really this kind of tapestry patchwork quilt was the starting point for some of our elevational ideas. Next. And then to go further, we really wanted to think about this idea of perspective and lenses and frames, because again, we wanted to help think about the kind of social metaphorical implications of this, but also how you translate from an urban kind of city scale to more of a human protected scale, thinking about being inside a unit, looking out versus the street kind of presence of the building, looking at the building. Next. And so here you see an overall rendering from the northwest corner, and you see this kind of terraced landscape in the middle of the facade along West Chicago Avenue, a building overhang at the northwest corner that's partial 2 stories and then leading down to 1 story. And that open space connects all the way to the southwest corner of the parcel, which you will see as flexible open space. So this major corner element is really community space, and it is got an indoor-outdoor connection to a cafe, rentable community space, and also provides an ideal area for the integration of community art. So we really feel like this is a hub that's bringing the community in. And then on the facade itself, you start to see the framed language that we're talking about that will go into more detail, going from a kind of urban scale to the more kind of human scale. Next. Is the view from Chicago Avenue, the north elevation. Next. And then just some simple modeling. I think the important thing about these images to note is that we are pursuing the same language wrapping around the entire building. There's no kind of front and back. It's consistent. We will potentially vary the wall thicknesses, but otherwise, next image, you see the kind of same framed approach will be carried through. This is the northeast corner. We will obviously change language as we head to more kind of transparent retail at the base. This corner is a grocery store entrance. To the left part of the image on the ground floor is the residential entrance, where we're trying to completely change to a more private element. We spoke in the last, or I heard in the last presentation, this idea of public versus private. We consider the residential to be a very private element, purposefully placed on a one-way street heading south where you could get great drop-off and arrival opposite the public side. Next. Next. And this is the southwest corner where you have the alley, but to the right of the image was going to be the kind of flexible public space that you will see could be for food trucks, for outdoor gatherings, and really kind of a contiguous outdoor experience all along the length of that building for the public. Next. From a facade standpoint, we really wanted to make sure that we picked up cues from the neighborhood. This part of Chicago Avenue, and much of it, is a masonry corridor. And so we felt it was important to try to incorporate brick if we could, but also thinking about the texture and the color that we see and the scale that we see up and down along the avenue. Next. And so thinking about the facade language, we have a framework of brick scaled appropriately for the neighborhood of a standard size. And then these kind of framing elements, of which we would have 2 or 3 similar but not identical. So sameness and difference is a reoccurring theme that we want to kind of chase down to the molecular level of the building. So those elements are currently, we're studying GFRC. We're also looking at other lightweight components that could have slightly varying textures. So what this does is mitigate from the urban scale, again, to the more kind of limited percentage of openings. We're probably looking at 26 to 28% transparency for the typical floors. These also allow us to play with partitions for the light gauge framing on these floors. So it offers a great deal of flexibility. And occasionally these portals project out with a little bit of a highlighted color and these kind of metal accents to kind of relieve some of the static nature that could be felt in a gridded building. Next.
Hi, you have approximately 5 minutes left.
Great. So just some reference images of masonry grid. Next. Thinking about some of the texture that it could occur in those portals. Next. And then really the planning idea, again, the building located kind of all the way to the east side with the public area in the yellow arrow connecting to flexible outdoor space, both on the north and south parts of the project. Now the north is not guaranteed. It's an additional open space, but we want to try to think about where there is open and potential green space. Then the residential entrance along Avers, apart and separate from the more public west side, with a real retail experience to the north. Next. This is the site plan. We can move in to the next page. So we really wanted to think about the landscaping. We do have city-owned right-of-way to the north side of the building, which we don't know what's coming, but we're going to landscape up to it. But really thinking about having dedicated seating areas, open areas, playground areas, shaded areas beneath the building, all to the west side. And then at the very south edge of the parcel, flexible outdoor space, again, for farmers markets, food trucks, etc. Trying to carry some of that feel into parking areas with porous paving. And then surrounding the building all the way to the east side, incorporating trees and paving where we can to continue this feeling of texture and richness. Next. At the ground floor, you see the main residential entrance again to the east with associated office space. We will be incorporating a fitness area there as well. And the main elevators, we have a grocery store, bakery that is all along the north side of Chicago Avenue. The cafe that opens up to the west, as well as the community space. And again, this kind of indoor-outdoor connection for public area with parking in the protected U-shape of the building. Next. So our typical floors, we have 21 units on the second floor here, ranging from studio to 3-bedroom size. And the important thing here is really that we're trying to place some of the larger units on the more prominent corners and the living spaces for those units on those corners as well. You see the open kind of area at the northwest, which corresponds to the building massing. And right in the middle of the facade, you see this kind of 12-foot wide open area that's being made significantly wider. It's not wide enough right now, but it's trying to incorporate outdoor space into the typical plan and light into the corridors. And you'll see on some of the upper levels, this gets wider. Next. So at the third floor, 20 units, again, studio, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, but here you start to see some of the more generous outdoor space. Again, breaking down the length of the corridor, we are going to also include breakout space adjacent to that outdoor area to try to make it a real feature for residents. Next. And then the fourth floor, very similar layout, more outdoor space corresponding to the massing. Next. Next. And we really wanted to try to get a feel for how we enliven the ground floor and what the relationship is between open space and use. So flexible community space relating to these gardens, bakery and cafe off of West Chicago Avenue, anchoring the corner and the main facade. And then an arts center was located in the northwest corner. We are currently in the process of moving that into more of a cafe function, but really kind of energizing public elements for the community all along the street, with the more private residential to the east. Next.
You have about a minute remaining.
And then finally, you know, these gathering spaces that we talked about on the outdoors and a flexible outdoor food truck type space to the south. Next. Next. And again, the outdoor spaces are important because we wanted to make this both not just under the building at the ground floor, but as the kind of landscape on the building itself. Next. And finally, you see the scaling of the elevations that we were talking about and really kind of try to create this indoor-out relationship between the rooms. And finally, in the sections, next page, it's really about thinking about a concrete podium with a light gauge elements up above. So that's the story so far for this very exciting project. We hope that it will be transformative and really loved for a long period of time by the people who reside here. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, please take a moment to review any comments received from the public in the Q&A box. I don't believe there are any for this project. But the floor is now yours for comments and questions to the applicant. Please raise your Zoom hand and we can call on you in order. Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Well, to the design team, I just want to say that I think this project should be commended. The presentation is wonderful, very complete. Thank you for that. And I think the community commitment that you convey, the innovative programming, the commitment to creating a better neighborhood when this building is built, I think that's all very evident. And so I just want to commend you for the spirit of the project. In terms of sort of specifics, I do think that the very big open space along Springfield Avenue is incredible if you can get that and add some rich landscape to the neighborhood with a dimension that you could really program this open space. And you'd sort of like to see that landscape commitment continue south into your flex area, maybe the front part of that flex area, the western part, maybe the same width as the garden above, could be more landscaped for sort of everyday use of the neighborhood, as opposed to this large paved area waiting for specific events. In terms of the program on the ground floor, I think we've had comments about how active are community activity rooms in the past, that quite often they're not active. And could that community activity room literally be in the cafe or added to the cafe, and then that space could be carved out when it's programmed? But when it's not programmed, it's somehow engaged with the daily activities of that cafe. And the market is great. And the residential lobby on the east side on Ayers Avenue feels a little small to me for the size of the building and the number of units. But it seems that that's a good location, but maybe it could be a bit more gracious as a lobby. The only other comment I have is that the upper level hallways are exceptionally long, as you mentioned. And the carving of the facade to bring light and green in is a great idea, but a very good idea, but there's still very long, very long corridors, and they bend at both ends, they bend. So you never see where they're going. So maybe you just can sort of, as you refine the design, just think about that corridor condition, because it's a little scary how long and bendy the corridor is. Those are my comments. I really love the project.
Thank you.
AP, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. I too want to commend the team. I think you've done a great job, and I think that it's a very thoughtful proposal on a number of levels. Just a couple things that I would suggest you think about as you move forward. One is the composition of the ground floor in terms of where the various components are located. I think that there might actually be some benefit in having the entrance to the residences and the cafe having some proximity to that green space so that they can help activate one another, right, on the Springfield Avenue side as opposed to the Avers side. I understand why you might want to create a residential district for the lobby on that other street, but it also occurs to me that if you are going to have a fairly sizable grocery bakery, they may need some alley access for service, and they don't currently have it. Currently, their only sort of back access would be through the parking area, and so there may be some reconfiguring of that floor that would actually benefit the scheme in its entirety. And then the second thing, I think that the incorporation of some outdoor space on the upper levels of the scheme is great. I see in the plan that it's indicated as green space, and if that is the intention, just be mindful of the fact that you're going to need enough depth there to be able to have sufficient planting, and that may be difficult given the kind of purity of the geometric grid that you've set up for yourself. So I realize right now it's just a placeholder for what will come ultimately, but I think that's something you might want to look at. So other than that, I think it's a great job, be a nice addition to the community.
Thank you.
Catherine, would you like to go?
Yes, thank you. Again, I reiterate what everyone has said before, your attention to ways to activate Chicago Avenue and provide a lot of spaces for people and a lot of different activities is to be commended. And your approach to sustainability is to be commended too. With that said, and having done some precast buildings in the past, at this early stage, I would highly suggest either meeting with a precaster. I don't know if you've met with anyone yet, and possibly looking at some wall sections. My understanding of the precast is you might have 4 to 6 inches of wall behind your setback panel, which means your panels may be 12 inches deep, and then the bay panels might be another 12. So you might have a 14-inch thick panel, which is pretty heavy, which might start to indicate transfer beam. I mean, precast likes to be stacked if it's load bearing, right? So at this, again, you're at a really early stage that you could really explore how this is going to work. And precast can be very crude. So how you do the form liner, or how you do this looks like thin brick, even whatever that band is, all those items just add a lot of cost. Whereas repetition, the more you can repeat something, the better, at least for cost. And then too, on the sustainability side, I'm glad that I heard you say you're looking at FIAS and looking at the size of glazing, and I hope you reach out to FIAS early and get them to model it so you can increase the glazing as much as you can. But again, those would be like really, really practical comments, which I think at this early stage, you should be able to take a look at those. So thank you.
And since this is kind of a dialogue, I will say we do have an outstanding team in place, and we have modeled this and we are digesting that information. Also, your comments on the precast are timely because we are moving away from that because of weight. The potential Formaliner idea was very attractive, but we are looking at lighter weight systems that maybe potentially include more insulation, because the insulation requirements on this project for the envelope will be quite high. So good comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Maria?
Quickly, I just also want to say I love the project. Really, congratulations. I love your idea for the corner, how they created continuity for the cover plaza. Really great project. So congratulations. If anything, the street tree canopy, I don't think I got a good sense of where will they be and how many of them will they be in the kind of front facade, but I trust that your design tree is going to plant every single tree possible on that sidewalk. And if it's not too much to ask, maybe the terraces, which I think are such a great gesture to provide that outdoor space for the residents. If there is any way they can get a little more generous, a little bigger, that cut in there, I think that will be fantastic, because you'll get more air and you can really have like a little more of that outdoor space right there in that cut. But overall, also love the project. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Maria, this is Kristen Brewer with LJC. I'll just add, we just had a beginning introductory zoning committee meeting, and they let us know that this particular part of the street will be redefined, and it's going to have an upgrade. So they suggested we limit what we do, keep what trees we have and all that. Within the next few years, it will be replanted and reimagined a little bit. So that's why it's kind of general on our drawings right now.
Great.
All right. If there are no other comments, perhaps we'll move on to the third item.
I'll do that.
Third and last item on the agenda.
You too. Bye-bye.
So we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes for the applicant team to present their proposal. Committee members, please hold your comments and questions until after the presentation. And then Gerardo, if you're able to pull up the presentation, let me know if you're having any issues.
Yes, I'm frozen over here, sorry.
Gerardo, please try now. Gerardo, oh, there you go.
So located at 4000 West North Avenue and 1616 North Pulaski Road in the 26th Ward, Pioneros is a project that is set to transform the vacant landmark Pioneer Bank building and empty corner of Pulaski Road and North Avenue into a mixed-use community hub. When complete, the project will feature a new 9-story mixed-use building containing 75 affordable housing units, a branch location of the Chicago Public Library, and a public plaza. The Chicago Landmark Pioneer Bank building and adjacent annex will be completely restored and feature a restaurant, community hub, incubator space, and office for JGNA. The overall project was conceived as part of the Invest Southwest RFP program. Please proceed with the presentation, And again, state your name prior to speaking. Thank you.
Matt, if you want to go ahead and lead us off.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for having us here today. We're really excited to be here. I'm Matt Moser. I'm a partner with Park Row Development. As we said, this is an Invest Southwest project that we're fortunate to be the co-developer on. The reason why we chose this project and why we chased it is our partner and founder for Park Row Development, Louis Puig, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, grew up in this neighborhood and used to bank at this building. So it's been vacant for a long time, and the challenge of the RFP was to figure out a way to restore it as a cultural hub. And so in addition to the affordability aspects of the new mixed-use building that you're going to see, there'll be 79 units of 100% affordable housing. But in addition to that, we wanted to view this as a way to focus on, workforce development, education, and wellness, and in that way, make it a community hub. So we think we're doing that. We're working with the community now to get feedback and see where we can make changes, where what our view of it will work. And with that, I'll turn it over to Juan and JGMA to go through the fun part of it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Matt. I'm just teeing this up in terms of like what led us to where we are today. You can go to the next slide. And then the next one. I think this is like a story of a perfect storm in many ways for us as a firm. Obviously, we've been very interested in the Invest Southwest program, but this one being in Humboldt Park really hit home for us, and it led ultimately to us being inspired to move our offices from downtown to this area. And then also working with some really incredible collaborators that predominantly are all Latino, helping elevate them, their practices, and all the wonderful work that they do. So it's a really broad story of just a lot of wonderful organizations that have come together. And since the announcement of the win, it's been equally wonderful to just start hearing stories from the community in terms of individuals that have been in this bank and their desire to see it brought back to life. So I think that's just been great motivation for the entire team. Next slide. And the quick backstory is the project started out in the RP as two sites. We're really linking those as one continuum. I'll just point out, because it'll get into this in the historic images. If you look at Pulaski just to the south, how it conveniently bends, you'll see how that change occurred over time. Next slide. And the other aspect is, in particular, when we think about the employees from JGMA, over 40 of us, half of which take bikes, and you start to look at absence. There's an absence of divvy in this area. I think that being in this location will help us inspire that kind of change as well. So that's of interest to us. Next slide. And then just keeping North Avenue active and just having, the activity of all these human beings in the Pioneer Bank and being a very important and vibrant part of the community is going to be so important to all of us. Next slide. And just the prominence of the site, that's all this is. Next slide. You can click through these next ones. Next slide. And then here's the history. I think the image on the right was really poignant for us, where intentionally the bank was at this kind of terminus of Pulaski. And it's interesting, it's no longer that way, as I pointed out, but that axially played a really important role in our thinking of the design. Next slide. And also just celebrating the work of Carl Witztium. It's important for us to celebrate that history and let it be the springboard of ideas for us as we move forward in the building. Next. And then looking at the Sanborn back, this is the map that really fascinated all of us, just the way the street was and then how it bent. And we don't want to lose that prominence of the bank and what it meant. Next slide. And just, I think, quote unquote, this is called West Humboldt Park. Some people think that Humboldt Park is only on division between Western and California, but as you saw the project before, Humboldt Park extends to so many other areas. I think this project allows us to continue that conversation and really celebrating everything that is this community. Next slide. And then here's some images of the existing. It needs some TLC, admittedly. Go to the next slide. There's some vandalism that's taken place. The next slides get into the existing. And, it's our intent, you'll hear, as my wonderful colleagues share with you, we want to maintain that spatial and volumetric quality. We're about just celebrating everything it was and bringing it back to life. Next slide. And then just some precedents, the idea of these banks being cultural foundations. We know it in Stony Island. We've seen it before in Chicago. Next slide, the typologies of library and housing and how they've been so successful play a role in our ideas. And then lastly, the convergence of old and new and how there can be a continuum created without just replicating. Next slide. And that led us to just, some of the early ideas. It's, the one on the right is the one that we ended up with that allows us to maintain kind of the axial relationship of the bank. And it just made it feel like we were just extending the history in an interesting way. Next slide. So this is that idea in the massing development where we're just essentially just extruding out of the bank building, almost pulling it and elongating it northward, and then carving out the portions that create plaza or community, what we call a balcony, so on and so forth, and set that up. Next slide. And then programmatically, certainly we've made, as it's been mentioned, the commitment to make this our home, but as Matt stated, the base of the bank really is a community incubator, and it will be that way. We've been meeting with the community, the Puerto Rican agenda in particular, and to preserve it and to use it for a variety of programs for the community is something that we're all very much interested in. And then the rest of the strata of library and amenities, and then culminating in a housing piece that is elevated above all the others so that everybody has an equal right to daylight and views. Next slide. And then this diagram just shows our interest in just that idea of stretching history and moving it northward. And then conversely, on the next slide, we had this wonderful conversation with Jose Lopez with the Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce. And just reminded all of us that Humboldt Park is not just Puerto Rican, it's not just Mexican, it's not just Colombian, it's not just Venezuelan, it's Costa Rican. It's so many Latino cultures. And then how could we draw from all of those and almost sample it on facade so that as you approach the building from north to south, it gives one feeling of the new leading into the old, conversely with the bank from the south to the north where the history starts and leads us into the next slide. With that, I'll hand it over to a wonderful colleague, Laura Flores.
Thank you, Juan. So I'm Laura Flores with JGMA. So moving on to the plan view, so our project consists of 3 buildings, 2 existing and 1 mixed-use new building, right? So we're keeping respecting the existing entries to the annex building, which is to the west of North Avenue, and then the main entry to the bank building. But how do we connect back to this new amazing, mixed-use building that we're creating on Pulaski Avenue? And we do that by introducing a secondary entry that is connected and linked to the new building with the plaza, public plaza, which is partially enclosed and also elevated, because we do have a difference in elevations between the building floor, ground floor, and then the proposed new mixed-use building. But we're also trying to respect that pedestrian access by not having any car access on Pulaski. So if you see here, the loading docks, the ramp access to the parking on the 2nd level is all off the alley. We're also providing some surface parking. And also want to point out that the landscaping around the bank is very modest, and that's due to existing conditions. You'll see on the next slide that there is a basement that actually spills into the sidewalk and into the street on both sides, on North Avenue and on Pulaski. So obviously plantings cannot happen there. We are trying to be obviously more green around the plaza on the east and west sides, where they're going to get sunlight, and along Pulaski as the street opens up. And just for the program on the basement, it's basically support spaces and amenities for the office tenants that will be on the main bank, ground floor, and also on the mezzanine. So you can go on to the next slide.
We're also at the 10-minute mark. Thanks.
Thank you. Here, as Juan mentioned, we're keeping the bank layout pretty much intact. Where you see the new offices are introduced is basically where the old bank teller stations used to be. In making that center space be open and flexible for community gathering, because that's what we've heard from community meetings, that's really what the community wants to use it for. In the annex, we're just also using it as open space. We're finding that more and more people want to join us as partners and tenants of the bank building. So office square footage is definitely required. As for the ground floor on the mixed-use building, that's primarily for a public library. There is also a community room that's facing the plaza, which will be used by the library, but also by the community. And then if you go to the next floor, you'll see that there's also more library program on the mezzanine, mainly just for more private and quiet programming. And then we're keeping the volumetric space of the bank as is. So no, we're not adding any floors or more levels into this big volume, just keeping it as is. And then just second level for the annex, again, for more office program. Next slide. This is just showing the higher mezzanine level for the bank that's also going to be occupied by our partner B-Tech and also another partner, Arquitectos. And just the second floor of the parking, which is approximately 55 spaces that we're providing for the housing tenants. Next slide. So this is JGMA's tenant space. This is more of a public space on level 3, but also, again, keeping it flexible because we do like to collaborate and host other partners, other non-for-profits that we've been working with. Sometimes we have them use our spaces and do stuff after hours. So how do we allow for that still? For the mixed use program, we have health counseling that's going to be run by Humboldt Park Health. We have amenities for the tenants. And also a highlight is an outdoor balcony for the tenants of the residential tower. Next slide. And then again, fourth floor of the bank is just more JGMA programming. The center that you see there is kind of a multi-purpose stair, just connecting our third floor with the fourth floor, but also just pretty open, kind of flexible space. For the fourth floor of the mixed use building, we have the bigger units on this. This is the atypical floor, so 4 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. If you keep going up, we have all the typical floors, level 5, 6, 7, and 8. So those, you have the bigger units on the corners, 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms, and then the mix of the 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And then what is not shown yet is just the possibility of having an outdoor terrace on top of the building, on top of the bank building, just for JGMA and also for the office tenants that will be occupying that space. And then next. This also, again, just showing our intent to have sustainable aspects in the building. We're going to do LEED Silver at a minimum, and we're also looking at PIA certification for the housing and just trying to incorporate some net zero incentives as well. So still looking into the feasibility of all of them, but it is our intent to do more than what's required. Next, and I think this is where I turn it over to Emilio.
Thank you, Laura. My name is Emilio Padilla. I'm also with the JGMA team. Before we get into the exterior, I wanted to show the typical unit plans for the mixed use building. We have 79 total units, and the unit mix includes everything from 40% one bedroom, 30% two bedroom, and then we have 15% of the units dedicated to three bedroom and 15% also for four bedroom, as that is a big need in this community. So we really tried to get the 4 units in there to work. So that's next slide, please.
I want to say you have about 5 minutes left. Thanks.
Thank you. And then, so before we get into the exterior, we wanted to share this detail to show what, part of the essence of the exterior, what Juan talked about. How do we introduce this color palette to the facade? How do we get this dual visualization in the building from north to south as you approach it from different angles? So we looked at a window wall system that has a vertical perforated sunshade that allows us to do that, to play with the color and to do a two-tone color where we have one on one side and one on the other. And at the same time, also the benefits of getting the sun shading onto the window wall system. So as I flip to the next image, you'll see how these vertical fins are expressed on the facade up on the upper portion there, and what we call the apartment massing being the mass above. But when we talk about the intent and how we looked at the bank and how we took the Pioneer Bank and we wanted to create this continuum of its history, and how do we extend that to the north to the vacant facade, so we bring that bank facade expression into the new building. And while doing that, also creating moments of entry of outdoor space and amenities for the mixed use building. So looking here at the center of the image, moments where we create this community plaza that bridges that divide between the bank and the mixed use development. Also the community terrace and balcony that splits the mass of the residential floors to the public accessible areas down below for the parking and the library. Next slide. And then just taking one of our main design principles to be able to experience the building from all sides. Right, we have an alley and we have a neighbor to the right, but the idea of taking that facade expression and wrapping it around the building was a key factor, and also the solid infill of the bank on the west facade is something that we have been studying. How do we bring in more light and air into right now a masonry infill? So opening that up and taking some of the language that we're using on from cues of the bank module and the bank openings on the primary elevations and bringing that over to the west. Next slide. And then here just showing you the view, the south elevation as you approach the bank building from Pulaski. Next slide. And then the view from the north to the neighbor on the north end. Next slide. And so these next series of images, we're gonna share what we had in our current proposal, the very early stages of the design, and where we're at now. So this image is showing where we're at before. Next slide. And then in our design progression, making very intentional moves to reduce the height of the building, to incorporate balconies into the residential floors, increasing the size of the plaza to have a much wider space. As you can see, we were challenged because of the tall verticality of the bank on the north facade, but it was a critical space to bridge that divide between the two buildings. So widening that was critical. Next slide. here looking from Pulaski, looking west was where we're at in the early stage. And next slide. And here showing this lighter touch approach to how the new mixed use building touches the bank. Right in the center here, we did a number of studies here to look at how to soften that and also emphasize the bank limestone cladding that returns around the north and the west elevations. Next slide. And then here showing also the height reduction, the reduction in cantilevers. And then here you have a very good view of that private outdoor tenant amenity that sits right between the parking level and the parking level, that really makes that separation between public and private in terms of the program. So very simple stacking. Next slide.
We have about 1 minute left. If you could wrap up your comments.
Sure. And then the next slide. And again, reinforcing the design principle experienceability on all sides and looking at how we're treating the design of the plaza and incorporating murals to be the front door. As we all know, Humboldt Park is very well known for the number of murals through Paso Boricua and North Avenue. And so we wanted to bring that as well into this community plaza space. Next slide. Next slide. And then really reinforcing that those upper level apartment floors have 360 views and gives residents views of all across the city. That's connecting them not just to the Humboldt Park neighborhood, but to the rest of the city. So with that, that concludes our presentation, and thank you for having us.
Thank you for that presentation. At this point, I would usually say again for the committee members to take a moment to review any comments, but it doesn't look like there are any comments from the public. So the floor is now yours, committee members, for any comments or questions to the applicant. Again, if you could please raise your Zoom hand and we will call on you. Thanks. Yes, Phil, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think, as we said in the very last project, this is incredibly interesting, innovative programming, wonderful reuse of the historic bank building, a real community asset. The team should be commended for taking on a project of this complexity and interest. It's, I think, a great project for the neighborhood. And also, I think the presentation is very polished. And like the other ones, I think it's a very clear presentation, although there's some areas to me that are kind of vague. And I'd like to focus on that for a minute. I don't understand what the plaza is under this parking deck on the north side of the building. It seems like it's not a very nice space, and I just would advocate to the team, rather than asking a question at this point, because we have so little time, I would just advocate to the design team to explore more of a separation between these two buildings rather than such an aggressive joining of the two buildings. It seems to me the residential slab above could slide to the north to give more space to the historic building, and the podium of parking, I just don't understand why it has to even touch the building. I think the alley turned into a plaza is a great idea, but could the plaza be open to the sky? And could you simply create two very good projects side by side that are joined by the design of the plaza. So you end up with three amazing projects: a historic renovation, a beautifully designed, community authored plaza open to the sky, and then your new building to the north. To me, would be a home run, would be just amazing. And where I'm stumbling is the way the two buildings come together and what's left. I'm not convinced this is really a plaza. I don't know where it's leading. So I have a lot of questions just about how the two buildings come together and the public space they form.
Yeah, Philip, those are all, I mean, we've had similar discussions internally about the plaza and how to solve it. We took a lot of cues from, there's, when you think about the urban plaza, right, and what that is, and a very typical urban component in South America and Central America, but you end up with spaces that are not necessarily park plazas or open plazas, but very tucked in, urban. Almost sometimes you're walking down the street and it just opens up into a very urban plaza that's surrounded by buildings. So to be fully transparent, it's not fully solved, but the plaza is a critical piece of the connection between the two. It also serves as really a community. Part of what we heard from the community is that they wanted a space to have large gatherings, right, and not just an indoor space, but an outdoor space for that. And we in some of the research that we did, we found that there was actually a very old, tall arched opening on the north facade of the bank building that we wanted to reintroduce, open that up, and have that space be able to connect with a new community space in the new building. So there's been a lot of discussion around that, and it definitely needs a lot, and needs work.
Yeah. I would agree. I think it needs a lot of work. But I would just encourage you to still be open to some of your earlier massing explorations that you shared with us. You had 3, and 2 of those 3, the 2 buildings were separated. And I think that actually all 3 massings are interesting, and the one you're ending up with is very interesting. But I don't see the need, just the programmatic need or the architectural need for the 2 buildings to literally join like that. I think the plaza would be better as a plaza if it was open to the sky. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Catherine, would you like to go next?
Yes, again, great presentation too, very thoughtful. I have a couple of kind of unrelated comments, and you might be able to shed some light on. One of them is, it seems like there's a lot of parking, and I'm wondering if that's programmatic or if there's any way that it's possible to reduce some of the parking so you don't have 2 levels of parking. And then the other comment, just looking at the plans of the units, and I know this is, we probably should be spending a little bit more time on the exterior, but the 4-bedroom units concern me a bit, because if you look at the living room, it looks like you have a love seat and then also, if these are family units, are people cooking, and where are they storing food? The kitchens look quite small for a unit that might contain 8 people, if you think 2 people per bedroom. So I would just maybe talk to, I don't know who is the housing developer, and have a few more discussions about what are storage requirements, and how much common space you need in these 4-bedroom and 3-bedroom units. They look from here, they look a little small to me. And then I guess the third comment is, I think, kind of playing on what Phil had talked about, that you have a lot of common space for residents up on an upper floor that I guess if you can think about where would people go, where would residents go? Are they going to spend more time on the upper floor because it's easier for them to get out there, or will they spend time in the public plaza? And then who's going to be at the public plaza? Is that more community members and less residents? And then how do you program it so both of those spaces are active and don't feel like they're empty spaces? So those are my comments, but thank you for a great presentation and for taking on the challenge of this building.
I can take part of that. Just going back to the parking requirement or the parking that's shown, just again, to be fully transparent, the initial concept had the 2 levels of parking, which was over 100 parking spots. We've now reduced it to only 1 level of parking, which hasn't been cleaned up throughout. So you see that there is some conflicting information, especially on the renderings, which we didn't have time to go back and revise. But we're now down to 1 level of parking, which is about 55 spots, and then the surface parking on the ground floor. And then, Emilio, I don't know if you want to take the comment on the units, which are still work in progress. So, we have the comments written down, so we'll definitely keep progressing that and making sure we have all the storage requirements and the square footage requirements integrated.
Yeah, no, that's a great eye, Catherine. Definitely the 4 bedrooms have been another challenge for us to get that many units into the floor plate. So I think those are valid about the small kitchen. You're going to have larger families, and I think a larger kitchen lends itself to that type of unit. And then on the storage side, we're using the tenant amenity level to provide storage for tenants, which is what we're calling level 4, where we have the community balcony terrace space. But they definitely need work.
Maria, I saw your hand go up and then go down. Did you mean to keep it up?
Oh, yes, but I think Casey was first.
Oh, okay, Casey.
Maria, I'm happy for you to go first. I just raised my hand more or less to reiterate what my colleagues have said. I think this is a super project, very thoughtful. It's nice to see a new addition to the neighborhood that rises to the level of thought and development that some of the historic architecture has, but does it in a very contemporary vocabulary. I think that Phil's recommendation that the 2 be decoupled and that the public plaza be made more of an open air plaza is a recommendation that I would echo as well. I also think that it would be nice if there were a way to get more light into the library. I realize that it does have a largely glazed perimeter, but by pulling back from the other building and opening up that plaza, it would just increase the light all that more. If there were a way to bring light down through some portion of the parking garage level so that there's some light from above, that would also be great. It's just libraries really play a very important community role. Increasingly, they're not just places to go for books, but for a whole range of community services. And I think the more energy that we can put into developing them well, the better served the community will be.
Thank you, Casey. Those are all good comments, and agreed that the light is another study that and that's one of the moves that we did, even pushing the ground facade of the library back. We have a very tight sidewalk to begin with, and so those are all very fair comments, and we'll look at them.
All right. Maria, do you want to go?
Thank you, Josh. Emilio, Laura, Juan, fantástico. It's such a joy You got me very emotional because I obviously see what you are doing, bringing Latin American cynetism to Chicago. And if for anything, for the public that's listening to this, that's the one. It's such a strong sort of movement in Latin America, cynetism through color, that I'm Venezuelan, so you made me remember the exquisite space of our airport in Caracas, and how the murals that were built very much in the same spirit that you are presenting here became so iconic and so rooted into the culture that when people were forced to migrate, millions of people out of that airport, they started taking small pieces of that, of those paintings with them to keep them, in their migrations, escapes. So that's what cynetism is for Latin Americans. So thank you so much for bringing that back to us. Like, it's really beautiful. And because that is so beautiful, you had me dreaming on how all that facade treatment can become the ground, can come down to the square, be the square, and enter the bank. And maybe we see it again all the way out in the sidewalk on the other side of the bank, have that cynetism run through the entire, be the public space and run through the inside and all the way to the, maybe historic preservation will kill me, but you just had me dreaming of how can this not only be the facade, but a magic carpet of time and come down the surface, be the square, and enter suddenly the bank and come out and see it again on the sidewalk on the other side. So you just had me dreaming of that idea, and it was beautiful. Another thing is, yes, the landscape and tree lowering me wants to see it open to the sky. But at the same time, if that's not possible for whatever technical reasons that, we don't know, you have looked at this for a lot longer than we'll ever, right? Maybe if it's possible to cut the parking lot in that area over the plaza and make that space just triple height, then you get lion air and you get the Latin American covered plaza with the synthetic major carpet all going all through it, right? Just an idea to put it out there as an option, as opposed to if the other one is not possible or something like that. But yeah, and you'll forgive me for being a landscape lover and public space lover, but yes, if there is every foot of width that you can give to that square within your requirements, we can never have a square that is big enough. So if it can get a little bigger, I think it will be fantastic, because then a market can happen in there, and it will be so cool. Congratulations. It's emotional, and I can't wait to see it built.
Just Maria, beautiful comments. Thank you. I just your last statement. There's a lot of street vendors in that area, and they each have their little spot, right? And there's maybe 3 or 4 corners where they all gather up, and I could see in that plaza all of them moving there and becoming like this mercado that you have of just gathering space. It could be a really beautiful urban space. But
oh man, yes.
the clear height, I think, is something we've been studying too, looking at the topography of what this plaza could be, sunken, raised, higher. I think so. There's a lot of possibility here, but this is also a snapshot in time where we're at now.
Yeah, and definitely your comment, Maria, about just bringing the color down onto all surfaces possible, because we're not afraid of color at JGMA, so we will take that and run with it. Unfortunately, we can't take it into the bank because they will kill us, but we will do it all around and over and wherever we can. So
I had to give it a shot, but you know, we can see it on the sidewalk at the end
Yeah.
of the bank over there, you know.
All right. I guess if there are no other comments, that is the end of that presentation and comment section. Since we've changed the format, this is pretty much where we adjourn, unless there are any other lingering comments or questions. And if there are, you can either email me or John Law. John, do you want to say anything?
That was great. Thank you for the participants for great presentations. Very clear as the appreciate you working with us through this process.
All right. So yeah, on behalf of DPD, thank you again for all of your critical thinking and thoughtful comments on these 3 important projects. So I guess until I see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.